Okay. All right, thank you everyone for coming out. This is kind of a new thing that we're just starting because it's on a Thursday. I was with another group, and that's Tuesdays, and it's very difficult to get any of the elected officials out on a Tuesday. So we're trying a Thursday, and so far it worked. Usually that way at all. Thank you very much for that too, as far as being able to make it. This is called like Local Matters News, I'll say. And we're going to start like a little newspaper that will start printing things like this, put it on the web so everybody can see it, put some input, see what's going on for the next, and it'll be local things. School board, we have a couple school board members here actually from East Penn also, and thank you all for coming out. If you don't mind, do a pledge to the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Things I just noticed from, I'll just use this one. This actually came from Justin's newsletter just today, and I wanted to point out a few things. He's actually asking for, wanted your government cost savings ideas. Very good. This is a good one for today also. And standing up for taxpayers, budget hearings begin, and town hall meeting schedules of other places where you might find him coming out. I'll just let it at that now, and I'll introduce Justin, if you don't mind.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. And John, I appreciate what you're doing and how involved Lynn and you are in the community, and trying to get our messages heard. I really appreciate that. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I came back from Harrisburg today. I'm on the liquor control committee, and we had a committee today with budget hearings on that issue. We can get into that later if you want to hear more about that. But I know John wanted me to speak about the budget that's the budget and the budget process that's going on in Pennsylvania right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to January of 2015 when Governor Tom Wolf first got sworn in. So we're going to go back to that point. And usually as the budget moves forward, the first thing a governor does is, in the beginning of February, he gives his budget address. And in his budget address in February of 2015, he called for a $34 billion spending budget. Keep in mind, Pennsylvania's current budget at the time was $29 billion. You were talking a $5 billion one-year spending increase, the largest in Pennsylvania history. To put that in perspective, it took 20 years for Ed Rendell, when he was governor, excuse me, I'll take that back. It took 20 years for Pennsylvania to get to a $20 billion budget. 200 years, excuse me. 200 years for Pennsylvania to get to a $20 billion budget. In 8 years of Ed Rendell, we got to a $28 billion budget, which was a 40% increase over 8 years. Governor Wolf, in 1 year, wanted to blow that up to the highest amount in 1 year in the history of Pennsylvania. How he wanted to pay for that was through several ways. One, he wanted to raise the state income tax from 3.07% to just under 4%. He wanted to raise the sales tax from 6% to 7% and expand that to 300 different items that are currently exempted from sales tax here in Pennsylvania. Things like baby diapers, things like college textbooks, etc., other things. So there was a bill to pay for this. To be fair to the governor, because I always try to be fair, he did say he would try to offset that with some sort of property tax relief. The problem I had with his property tax relief plan was the most property tax relief anybody could get was $1,000. And I don't know about you, at least in my district, a lot of people, well, I'm going to take that back. He said everybody would get a 50% discount on their property taxes or $1,000 back. And so I went back to my district and I said, how many people who have homes in our district that pay school property taxes pay $1,000? How many people is that 50% of their school property tax bill? Most people I talked to said that it's not what their bill was. So I had a fundamental problem with his plan. My solution for school property taxes is HB 76, which eliminates school property taxes over a series of about 4 years. You may ask, how do you pay for it? You do have to raise the state income tax from 3.07 to about 4.35% and raise the sales tax from 6 to 7%, but you are eliminating school property taxes. You are not discounting them, you are not lessening them, you are eliminating. And that's the problem I had with the governor's plan, because, you know, I remember when Ed Rendell sold the gambling issue. He said there would be school property tax elimination or reduction. And I think we all know with gambling now that it's been a pittance what we have gotten back with regard to school property taxes. So I believe if we're going to go after school property taxes, we have to eliminate them. And that's why I will not support any broad-based tax increase unless we have a constitutional amendment that specifically eliminates school property taxes for everybody. Specifically, you have to, because there is no tax that is temporary. You know, it's interesting. You look at our history, and so many people will say, you know, or politicians will tell you, you know, well, we're just going to put this tax on for a few years. It's temporary. Blah, blah, blah. All I have to tell you is the Johnstown flood tax. Anybody remember when the Johnstown flood was? It's a pretty long time ago. The 1940s. You're still paying it. You're still paying it. So don't tell me that there are any temporary taxes. And that's the problem with government today. So, you know, that's where I had a difference with the governor on his bill. But to go back to the budget process. So, you know, let's keep in mind, again, let's go back to the makeup of the legislature. You know, we have a Democrat governor, and he did win. He did beat Tom Corbett by 9 points. He did win big. But at the same time, Republicans in the House and Senate won overwhelming majorities. A lot of people don't realize this, but in the House and Senate, we have the biggest Republican majorities we've had since Dwight Eisenhower was president. Dwight Eisenhower was president. And you know, people will say, oh, that's gerrymandering. It's not. We have a lot of seats that Republicans hold that are extremely democratic on registration. So it's not gerrymandering. So what that told me was, with the election, was maybe people were not necessarily happy with Tom Corbett, but they wanted to check and balance on what he was saying. And I took that to heart. For instance, in my district, Tom Wolf, the current governor, beat Tom Corbett 51 to 49%. But I had a Democratic opponent that ran on basically everything Tom Wolf said. But I beat him 63 to 37%. So whatever that means, I don't know. But what I do know is I felt like I had a mandate in my district to continue to protect taxpayer dollars in my district. So again, going back to the budget. Unfortunately in Harrisburg, and I hate this, I'll be the first to admit to you that I hate this, but budget talks don't seem to really heat up until the month of June, because June 30th is when the budget is due. And for some reason, I have no idea why we don't start in March, April, May. Budget negotiations don't heat up till about the month of June. And it's really frustrating, but I'm not in leadership. I'm just a rank and file member, but it's very frustrating. One of the things, though, that our leadership did that I thought was brilliant was on June the 1st of 2015, the first thing we did, as the House Republicans, in the House of Representatives, you have to pass a spending bill, you have to pass a tax bill before you pass the spending bill, which means you have to pass the bill to pay for the spending before you pass the bill for the actual spending. So our leader brought up a bill on June the 1st of 2015 of the governor's actual tax plan to pay for his spending that all of the Democrats claim that they support. The increase of the income tax from 3.07 to just under 4, the increase of the sales tax from 6 to 7%, and expanding that to over 300 different items. It didn't get one vote. It did not get one vote. Not one Democrat, not one Republican voted for the bill. We took that back to the governor and we said, look, Governor Wolf, you do not have the votes to pay for your proposals. You need to come back to the drawing board. He was not willing to do that. He thought because he beat Tom Corbett that he had a mandate. So we continued to go back and forth with him through the month of June. He would not listen. We finally got to the point, and again, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with waiting until the last minute when I'm not in leadership. We waited, we kept going back and forth through the month of June, and finally we said, look, we're going to pass our own budget in the legislature. Republicans in the House and the Senate are going to pass our own budget. We're going to pass about a $30 billion budget that lives within our means, that doesn't raise taxes, that also increases education spending by $150 million per year, and funds all our important priorities, and we're going to put it on the governor's desk without raising taxes, because that's what we can get done in the legislature. We live in a representative democracy, right? To have effective government, you need the legislature and the governor to come together. The governor was clearly saying he would not work with us. So we said, look, this is all we can do. We put it on his desk. Within 5 minutes on June 30th, he vetoed it. Not just line items. He vetoed the entire bill, which was unprecedented in Pennsylvania history. Even when Ed Rendell was governor of the Republican legislature, he could not veto an entire budget. He line item vetoed different line items. There's about 400 plus line items in a budget. And he just would line item veto different budget line items that they disagreed with. So, for instance, in the budget that he completely vetoed, over half of the line items we agreed with the governor on. Things that funded human service agencies, county shelters, agriculture, different things, we agreed with him. But he decided to take the extreme, and I mean the extreme approach, of vetoing the whole budget, just so he can hold the Commonwealth hostage to get his tax increases. It was unprecedented. It has never been done before in Pennsylvania. Some people said it was a rookie mistake and inexperience. I don't think so. I don't think so. The longer I get in this business, I don't believe in those things. I think what he wanted was to hold us hostage for his broad-based tax increase and to try to put pressure on us. Fortunately for us, we have not caved on that. As we kept going forward through the summer, we tried to pass stopgap budgets, temporary budgets to fund our certain priorities. In order to do that, including overriding Governor Wolf's vetoes on certain line items, we need a 2/3 majority to override a governor's line item veto. So that means we don't have enough votes as a solid Republican caucus. We need the votes from House Democrats and Senate Democrats. They weren't willing to give us those votes. So we continued to fail on those notions. As we continued to move forward, we tried all these different options until we finally got to December. And December, let me tell you, was a very interesting month. A very interesting month. A lot of things were on the table. And at one point, it looked like there was a deal on the table. The deal would have been that, and I can speak for the House, but the deal from what I was told was there would be some kind of lukewarm, and I mean lukewarm as in not real, but pension reform for Governor Wolf's $450 million increase in education spending. And then his increases in taxes, because we have to pay for that. The Senate Republicans were ready to give in on that issue. The only thing holding that back, and this is right before Christmas, were the House Republicans. Honestly, I thought the deal was done. I would do everything in my power. Many of my colleagues were going to do everything in our power to stop that. And we tried. And we thought the deal was done. But something happened on the way to that deal, which was interesting. As bad as that pension reform bill was that I just told you about, the lukewarm pension bill, not one Democrat would vote for pension reform. Not one. And that killed the deal. That killed the deal. They would not go against the teachers' union on pensions. It was ridiculous. And we needed their votes for this deal, for this broad-based deal. We needed House Democrats, Senate Republicans, and the governor to come together. When that became clear, we went back and we put the budget, we put the budget on his desk in December, right before Christmas, that we put on his desk in June. You know, we go through the holiday, Christmas holiday, about a week after Christmas, he ends up signing about 90% of the budget. But he line item vetoes about 10% of it, including education spending. And I know my good friend Arlen asked me, there was a question about schools having to borrow money with what's happened. What has happened is the budget we gave the governor gave a $150 million increase to public schools. Because he wanted leverage for his tax increase, he decided out of about the $5 billion we put into public schools in that budget, he decided to cut $2 billion out, just for leverage. So we would be held hostage to vote for his tax increase. That was him. So as much as the Democrats have continued to go after Republicans on cutting education spending, which is not true, the one who has cut education spending by what he did with this budget is Tom Wolf. Why schools are going to have to borrow money soon is because Tom Wolf line item vetoed what we gave him with education spending in order to hold us hostage to increase broad-based taxes on every Pennsylvanian so he can get the number he wants. That's really what is happening. And I'm so happy that I have the forum here to tell you about that tonight. So that's where we are right now. As I said, about 90% of the budget is passed. A lot of people say, get the budget passed. And, the 2015-2016 budget is not completely passed, but most of it is. Money is flowing and things like that. But what's going to happen is we're going to go into the next budget cycle, which the governor also addressed us about 2 weeks ago about his new budget for 2016-17. And he talked about a $2 billion structural deficit that we have, which is true. We do. And at the same time, he wants to raise spending by $3 billion while we have a $2 billion structural deficit. So my question is, how the hell do you pay for that? And the only answer is you have to increase taxes, and that's Ultimately, as I said, as I get older, I learn more and more about this political game. He's trying to hold us hostage to increase broad-based taxes on every Pennsylvanian. And the fact is, I am not going to cave on raising broad-based taxes on every Pennsylvanian. There is too much we can do to reform Harrisburg and cut spending before we raise taxes on Pennsylvanians. The first thing is pension reform. Why all new hirees in the public sector pension system are not in a 401k system like 90% of the private sector, I don't know. But it should happen, and it needs to happen, and I will not ever vote for a broad-based tax increase before that happens. Why we don't continue to go after waste, fraud, and abuse in our welfare system, I don't know. We've passed laws and bills that have gone after people on welfare that use their welfare benefits to gamble, to smoke, to buy alcohol. And the Democrats have continued to take us to court to throw it out. And the courts have ruled with the Democrats. We could have saved $600 million per year on that. I'm sorry, I do not think if you are on public assistance, you should be able to gamble, drink, or use or buy tobacco with public assistance. I have no problem with a safety net. But it's a safety net. It's not for using it for leisure. So there is a lot of different ways. People say, you know, the other side of the aisle consistently says that we've cut to the bone. We have not cut to the bone. And I will also say, yes, we can cut in the legislature too. I've led by example in the legislature. I don't take the pension. I don't take the per diems. I don't take the car. I don't take the cell phone. I agree that we need to reduce the size of the legislature, and I voted for it. We have the largest full-time legislature in the United States of America. The state of Texas has doubled the population of Pennsylvania. Their legislature is half the size of ours. We need to cut the size of our legislature. And the good news on that front is, finally, the House has been trying to pass this for years. Finally, this session, the Senate has passed it as well. The reason why I say that is, in order to reduce the size of the legislature, you have to have a constitutional amendment. In order to have a constitutional amendment, you have to have the House and Senate pass this bill in 2 consecutive sessions. So thankfully, this session, we've got it done. If we get it through one more session, next time, it's going to go to voter referendum for you to vote on it. And I seriously encourage you, even if it means me being out of a job, to vote to reduce the size of the legislature. It needs to happen. I think it's the biggest problem in Pennsylvania. I really do. I really do. And so there's a lot of different things. Believe me, when you hear from politicians that we can't cut or there's nothing we can do, oh, yes, we can. I'll bring you out to Harrisburg sometime and I'll show you how much we can cut. It's ridiculous. So that's basically where we're at. Unfortunately, the governor has held up basically every other bill because of the budget. I am certainly willing to talk about other legislative issues, whether you want to talk about paycheck protection, gun rights, anything else, but really what's been going on right now because of divided government in Harrisburg is the budget. So I will open the floor for any questions or comments. Thank you.
And if I can say, if you're going to ask questions, please be specific to a question, not go on about some problem, that kind of thing. And just one at a time. Go for it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, still not clear on this, how the governor could arbitrarily just pay out like 40% of the money for education for like, well, let's say, the school, back to the school districts. What authority did he have to change? I mean, I understand he can either approve it or disapprove it, but he actually changed it, didn't he?
Now, I'll tell you what he did. We sent so many bills to his desk, and what he did was, back, as I talked about in the summer, we sent a bill to his desk for the temporary stopgap funding for education, to give them their money. So that was on his desk, and he just let it sit there. When we got to December, we sent the full budget to him with the $150 million increase in education spending. So he signed most of that budget we sent to him. But rather than sign that $150 million increase in education spending, he vetoed it and went back to the stopgap we sent him back in August, which was only temporary. It was not for the year, which cut spending for education by $3 billion overall for the year. And he used that, and it was temporary, as leverage for a tax increase. So he was playing, I would say, parliamentary tricks with what he did there.
So he vetoed the education in the budget, totally,
Yes.
which he.
Yes, he vetoed funding education for the year.
Yeah. And
But at the same time, he knew by January that schools would start to close. So he passed this emergency stimulus that we gave him. And that's the only reason he did it. But at the same time, he did that to put leverage on us to vote for tax increase. Yes, sir?
Okay, I kind of have like a math question. So all the tax money that goes to the government is by the people that work, correct? For the most part, or like employers, okay? So in theory, if we have a deficit or we don't have enough money to spend for it, wouldn't the idea be, instead of raising taxes, raise the number of people that are working? So if, say we have 60% of the population working that are able-bodied, and don't have any issues. So if we get that up to 70%, like when you guys figure this budget, what do you figure? Is there like a math formula you get to know how much money you're going to get for people working to like kind of try figuring that out?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean,
Because
I don't
raise the
know.
number of people that are working, you guys have more money to blow on, whatever.
Right, yeah.
You have more
And-
money by having more people that work.
And I don't know of any formula, but the one thing I know, at least in my principles, is I do not believe high taxes and raising taxes increases job growth. I don't. I see what goes on all around us. I see even here in the Lehigh Valley, we have benefited from New Jersey's abysmal job climate. As bad as ours is, New Jersey's is 10 times worse. And that's why businesses have come to the Lehigh Valley. We have the highest corporate net income tax in the United States and Pennsylvania. We need to lower it. We need to lower broad-based taxes in Pennsylvania. I believe when you lower broad-based taxes, when you lower the corporate net income tax, you're going to attract more businesses to Pennsylvania. Which, when you attract more businesses to Pennsylvania, what happens? You create more jobs, which creates more taxpayers, which creates more tax revenue. So I don't have a specific formula, but as a principle, that's what I believe. So, I just am philosophically opposed to this governor that we're going to increase taxes, and make no mistake about it, we're going to increase taxes to pay for the public sector unions that donated to his campaign. That's what this is about. And I'm not willing to do that. Yes, sir.
This $2 billion deficit, where does this come from? Is this historical background on this?
The deficit goes back to the 2008 crash. As I stated earlier, it took 200 years for Pennsylvania to get to a $20 billion budget. It took only 8 years for Pennsylvania to get to a $28 billion budget, which was a 40% increase. Ed Rendell was extremely reckless with his spending. What happened about at the end of his term, right before he left, before Tom Corbett came in, Ed Rendell cut education spending and used federal temporary stimulus dollars. I don't know if you remember that when Obama first came in. He did the stimulus. He was handing it out to states. And Rendell used that for 2 years to balance the education budget. Republicans in the House and Senate, at the time I was not in the legislature, I actually was in college. Every legislature told school boards and school superintendents that that money was temporary and do not count on it. They didn't listen. So Tom Corbett comes in. That money expired. And there's a $2 billion hole. And guess what? They blame Tom Corbett for cutting it when he did not cut it. Ed Rendell cut it and used federal temporary money to fill that in. So that's really what happened. I mean, the 2008 crash really hurt us, but his reckless spending over 8 years got us to where we are today.
So just to clarify, that $2 billion has been in deficit since back then.
Yeah, yeah, and it's never really been able to be settled. You know, we've been able to, in certain years that have been better, close it a little bit. And I will say this: government accounting is a joke. It's not like the private sector, but at the state level, we do have to at least try to prove that we're balancing our budget, unlike the federal government. So we at least have to make a case that we are balancing our budget at the state level. And we do every year. But then every year we get to the end of the year and we find out we didn't balance it. And it goes back to Rendell spending. I mean, I cannot stress that enough. I mean, just really think about that. I mean, I've been saying this for 6 years since I got in office. And I can't stress it enough. I mean, Pennsylvania, you know, second oldest state in the Union to Delaware. 200 years to get to a $20 billion budget. 8 years of Ed Rendell to get to a $28 billion budget. Pennsylvania is not a growing state. We are second only to West Virginia in the least amount of population growth. We lose congressional seats every census because we are not gaining population in Pennsylvania. So really, that's what has gone on, is Ed Rendell never was willing, and he did raise the state income tax, I will say that. He tried to pay for his spending with the state income tax increase from under 3% to 3.07%, and try to pay for it with the gambling. And it just was not enough to pay for the spending. And, you know, as I said, there's a lot to cut, and I'm willing to do it. Yes, sir.
What's the temperament in Harrisburg regarding reducing the national as high as corporate taxes? Is that?
Yeah, I think there is a very...
Because I agree with you, if you lower that
yeah.
corporate tax, you're going to attract more corporations, and they're going to bring in the people and the jobs.
I think there is a lot of what's the word? A lot of people want to. I mean, I would even say I think Governor Wolf is saying he wants to. But his idea to do that is he wants to raise taxes here, 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 and here to offset that. And I don't necessarily think that's what you have to do. I think if you do that,
It'll offset it.
it'll offset it. So, you know, I mean, what's interesting though is Governor Wolf does agree it's too high. We just disagree on paying for that. I think lowering it will bring businesses, because then if we lower it, then we don't have to do all this corporate welfare, for instance, here in Pennsylvania. What I mean by corporate welfare is we have to, because our tax structure is so bad here in Pennsylvania, what we have to do is, say for instance, we have a corporation here in Pennsylvania, and they come to Pennsylvania, you know, I think of Olympus, for instance. Olympus is in my district. And they get the KOZ funding, which is like a tax-free zone. And when that expires, they're going to come to Harrisburg and they're going to say, we're leaving. Your taxes are too high. No. Rather than continuing to subsidize company after company after company, why not lower the rate for everybody so they stay? And, you know, that's where I totally differ with Tom Wolf is. His thought is, I want to lower the corporate net income tax and raise taxes on everybody else so I can give money to my supporters, AKA the teachers union, and then I'll also use that money to pick winners and losers to stay here in Pennsylvania. And I don't think that's government's job. I'm sorry, I don't. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank John. He's going to be chasing a lot of people away from Wildwood Ford or something.
A lot of people are.
We'll be leaving the state. Now, I think Pennsylvania really has a good location.
It does.
And if we could get right to work, a lot of New Jersey, it's expensive to have businesses
Absolutely.
in New York, in New Jersey. We're close to the seaport over there.
Absolutely.
We can have a lot of businesses.
I totally
coming
agree.
this way. And with a
You're
reduction in the state tax, I mean, it's
You're
almost common
you're
sense,
100% right.
but, well, you know,
No.
down there, than you.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And, you know, I will say this. When we had Governor Corbett as governor, and I will be the first to admit this, and I will say, you know, I take responsibility for it because I was in the legislature, but we should have gotten more done. But we did not have enough conservative Republicans in the legislature willing to do it. Too many of them were bought off by unions that were not willing to move. Something as simple as allowing you to be able to buy a bottle of wine in the grocery store. That was too much. And it's really, really frustrating. That's one of the reasons why I'm continuing to run for office, because I truly believe that I am not the problem out there. I'm trying to continue to fix the problems out in Harrisburg. And there are a lot of people that are still out there that are entrenched that are the problem in Harrisburg. And I am very, very confident that by 2018, I'm really hoping we're going to have a new governor. I will not say, but I have a very good friend in the state Senate. His name is Senator Scott Wagner. I've heard he's running for governor. And all I can say is, if he ever gets into the governor's mansion with the Republican legislature, we will get this stuff done. We will get it done. I am confident.
So it seems to me that in line item vetoing a budget, passing 90% of it, we have a surplus rate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we're all not going to say that we should have funded schools a little bit more.
Right.
It's a bunch of bullshit, but to me, the schools will survive somehow, and it's going to suck for a little bit. But why not just play hardball and just move on to next year's budget?
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but there's not enough Republicans in our caucus that are willing to go with that. There was a majority in our caucus that would do that and say, look, okay, Governor Wolf, you signed it, we're going home. We could do that, but there, unfortunately, are not enough Republicans that are willing to do that. There's still a lot of Republicans still pushing for a severance tax and other different kinds of taxes and fees and little things that come up there to pay for things. And, you know.
So do you feel that they'd rather pass a bad additional budget rather than not pass something? Is that what you're feeling?
I would say the majority of our caucus, no, because I was even surprised by the end of Christmas. I really thought the train had left the station, that these tax increases were going to go through when the Senate made that deal. And when, at the end of the day, we were able to derail that deal, and trust me, the only people that derailed that deal were House Republicans. That train left. The only people that derailed that deal were House Republicans. And when we were able to do that, my confidence did increase a little bit. So, you know, I can't honestly answer that question, but I guess I could say I guess I'm a little more confident than I would have been, 6 months ago, that we can be able to, get our fiscal house in order.
Yes, do you feel that this is going to be a pattern? What's the sentiment of Harrisburg
With the budget?
Because Barack Obama has been doing something for all 7 years.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I think from what I've heard, Senator Pat Brown is the local senator for our area. I know not for Emmaus, but he's the appropriations chairman, and he told me that they're going to try, and he would know because he's in leadership, that they're going to try to combine the 10% of last year's budget that didn't pass with the next year's budget and do it all at once. But I don't know. I don't see it. The governor addressed us 3 weeks ago and said that, this is basically verbatim, agree to my tax demands or find another job. And now Now, on WAEB 790, he's running ads against me, saying the same thing on conservative radio, because I have a Republican opponent. So it's just interesting to me that see what is going on with this governor. He does not know what compromise is. His idea, if compromise is my way or the highway, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to go out to your district and bully you and go on the radio and bully you and send mailers to your constituents and tell them you're the worst person on earth, that you hate kids, that you hate puppy dogs, that you hate children, that you hate all these other people. And that's his idea of compromise. And it's not conducive to getting anything done. And as he continues to do that, he just makes the situation worse. He had a real opportunity with his budget address to bridge the divide, and he should have. He should have realized, look, I have a conservative legislature. There's nothing I can do about it. And I have to govern. I'm the governor of Pennsylvania. He didn't. Instead, he doubled down on what he's done since he got in there. And it's not going to work.
So it looks like he's going to do the same thing.
It's not going to work. You know, I mean, to answer your question, the only way that we will be able to govern is if he starts losing Democrats in the legislature. In order to govern without a governor in the legislature, you need to have a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate. So in the House, we have 203 members. We have about 120 Republicans. We need about, I don't know, I'm not going back. We need about 30 some Democrats to help us. In the House, or the Senate, we only need like 3 or 4, because it's only 50 to get to 2/3. So I think it's a question of, are the Democrats in the legislature going to be willing to start seeing how reckless this governor is and help us? And I do think that I'm not going to get anybody's hopes up. I would say I would like to hope at some point they're going to see that he's not interested in governing, and they're going to want to come to the table and govern. But I think that's the only way to do it. Unless the other thing would be if the Republican leadership in the House and Senate, which they did try to do, tried to form a majority with the Democrats and increase taxes and cut the Republicans out. That's always a possibility. But if they do that, they'll be hell to pay. Those leaders will vote them out. There's the political dynamics of all this. They could do that to get a budget done, but then their careers are over. Their political careers are over if they do that. Because you have Republicans that earn the majority. And again, like I said, they tried to do this. And what they're saying is, well, we don't have enough of our own Republicans to get this budget passed. So what we're going to do is we're going to get like 20 Republicans out of the 120, and then we're going to get all the Democrats to vote for something, and then that's what we're going to do to pass it. And that's not going to play well. Yes, sir.
So, with the 2016 budget still not 10% passed, you're still working on that getting passed? What happens if that comes up to the date of the 2017 budget coming due? Do you fight both budgets at the same time?
Yeah, they're going to try to combine both budgets, but it's actually a very good question because I've asked constitutional scholars in the House. This has never happened before. So I've asked them the same question you've asked. And I said, well, we're supposed to balance it by June 30th, so what happens? And they're like, well, we don't know. So I don't have an answer, to be honest with you. I don't know.
Yeah, with the line items he vetoed, Penn State extension, Penn State Ag Sciences, a lot of the animal health services, they're not gonna last that long.
No.
No money.
No.
How are you gonna pay all these extension aids?
Well, I think, at least where agriculture is concerned, I think there's a good chance we'll get that passed.
That's where we're hoping.
Yeah, with Democrats. Where the battle's gonna be is education. That's where I think there are enough Democrats in agricultural communities in Western PA that I think will go against the governor on that, and we can override it. I do think that. But when it comes to education, I think they're gonna hold the line because they want a broad-based tax increase to pay for it. And they will not budge, and they will let schools shut down, they will let, like we talked about, schools take out interest payments in order to do it, to blame the Republicans. They will let it go to DEFCON 5.
Yeah, but along those lines, I was talking at Southern Lehigh, they're with their fund balance hanging on, but a lot of the other districts are borrowing money at a high interest rate, because the interest rate, with all this going on, the interest, what do you call it, the interest rates are going up because the rating is not as good, whatever you call that thing. Yeah, so in the long run, all these districts are going to really have to increase their property tax in order to pay for these additional costs that they're incurring because they're not getting their regular money.
And that's ultimately,
And that's going to wake some people up.
that's the leverage the governor is trying to use to get us to vote for a broad-based tax increase.
Yeah, but it's he, not you, that is not letting the money.
Exactly, but he's gonna blame us, you see? But he's gonna blame us because he's gonna say, because they won't agree to, because what, he plays a good game. He doesn't talk about how to pay for it, but he says, but what he'll say is, I want to increase the state subsidy to education, which will lower your property taxes. But he doesn't say that I'm going to raise your income and your sales tax. And then he's going to blame the Republicans that they don't want to do that, so your property taxes are going to go up. You see, he's very slick like that. He's very disingenuous, and that's why I have these events to try to tell people that it's not all cut and dry the way he says that it is. I mean, all I can tell you is the state subsidy to education before this year, before Tom Wolf cut $3 billion from education, was the highest it's ever been in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Over $10 billion goes to education. Even though our enrollment since 2008 has gone down, our results have gone down, but our allocation from the state has gone up to $10 billion. Tom Wolf, in order to get leverage for a broad-based tax increase from all of you, decided arbitrarily to cut $3 billion out of that to $7 billion. Based on inflation, what he did, based on inflation, took the state subsidy toward education back to the level of 1988.
So is there a basic education funding formula? Did that actually pass, and is it in place?
There is a formula, and there is a revised formula that we are absolutely trying to get passed. It has not passed the full legislature yet. It has passed the House. It just hasn't passed all three bodies yet, but there needs to be an adjustment to the formula altogether. I mean, we have districts.
But then you got big issue that went around.
Yeah, because we have something called the hold harmless doctrine here in Pennsylvania, which means you could never receive a state subsidy lower than the year prior. But guess what? We have school districts in Western Pennsylvania that have half the enrollment they did years ago. But because of hold harmless, we can't reduce that, even though we should. And that's what the new funding formula, which I was a part of that commission, does, is redistribute that money to the districts, including here in the Lehigh Valley, which we're a growing area. East Penn, growing. Southern Lehigh, growing. Parkland, growing. Saucon Valley, growing. To get that money shifted over here from those districts that aren't. It's just a matter of, again, the governor is playing games with pretty common sense issues. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I always felt that, House Bill 76 is perfect. We need to do that, eliminate the school property tax.
Right.
But it seems like those two things should go together at the same time, so that people don't feel like the local
Yeah.
is losing the control.
And with 76, you need to have a constitutional amendment to outlaw school property taxes. You have to put the knife into school property taxes when you do it. If you leave even a microcosm of any kind of ability for a school board to have or raise a school property tax, they're going to do it. You know they're going to do it. And so that's why we also need the constitutional amendment. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The funding formula with HB 76, to me, is the answer.
So then what do you say to people when they say, oh, but the locals will lose their control?
Well, you're still going to have school boards.
Right.
You're still going to have school boards that make all those
And
decisions.
they'll get their allocation.
They get their state.
And
They will get the
decide.
same allocation from the state, adjusted for inflation year by year. It's going to come to the state, come to the school board. They will determine how to distribute it. The school board will still be elected by the people, whatever the terms are. You know, I think it's 6 years for a school board. So it's just that it's not coming. It's going to Harrisburg and then coming back to the school board, the same amount, but they still have the control over the money. They just don't have their, in my opinion, their fiefdom anymore to raise taxes as they please.
What is the guarantee that the state won't misuse those funds?
That's a good question.
Because,
Right.
I mean, again, I'm not that familiar with House Bill 76.
Right.
But from my personal perspective, I would almost rather pay more money to my local school board than pay less money to Harrisburg, and God knows whatever's going to happen with it in Harrisburg.
Right.
I feel I've got more control over here at my school board
And
than the
yeah,
legislature.
and that, I mean, and that's a good argument, and you know, that's one of the arguments against HB 76. And you know, there's ways that HB 76 could be amended to put cost controls on that, or to put, you know, controls on increasing spending. But that is one of the arguments against HB 76. It's, you know, there's two sides to every story, obviously. But if you're going to eliminate local school property taxes, the only way to do it is it has to go to Harrisburg and come back. So it's a balance. I agree.
Can I counter that a little bit? Ran for school board 2 years ago. Teachers union money gets through Pat Slattery's group, $17,000 to keep the two conservatives off the board. Okay, so you don't have that control. Now, it happens every budget time, every year. The superintendent says, I'm going for, we're not going to be able to hold to the village, we're going to go for extra. And when it comes time for the budget, he goes, oh, we didn't have to use everything Harrisburg gave us, we went less.
Yeah. And the game,
It's
yeah.
historical.
And the
What-
game,
what's
and the
gonna
game.
hap- I'd rather have it happen at my school board, because the same thing will happen in Harrisburg, except you're gonna have more people, you're gonna have more people scrambling for the money, and I will bet you that that money, which we thought would otherwise go to our school district, is gonna go to some other school district, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg.
HB 76 does not allow that. It does say the allocation that they currently get is what they get, and every year it goes up on the cost of inflation and population growth. So it does,
Until
does say that.
Until they say we wanna use that money.
And you're right, and you're right, and some, you're right, some, I mean, you know, I
Six of one,
can,
half
some
of the other.
politician could get in there and say, look, we're gonna change 76, and we're gonna give 60% of the money to Philadelphia. You're right. But, you know, but at the same time, as you're saying, the system we have now with our local school boards also isn't working. So I think the way I look at it is, I'm not saying HB 76 is a panacea for everything. But I think it's worth a shot. I think it's worth trying it. What's the big deal? Let's try it. If it doesn't work, we go back to the way it was. It's easy. Let's try it.
Who determines when the superintendent applies for an increase in the millage above and beyond what the state sets? Who allows that to happen? Who looks at the ledger or the budget that the superintendent puts forward and says, oh my God, you're in distress, you need more money. We're going to allow that to happen. Who determines?
That's a good question. I think it's in the Department of Education for the state.
Does that include like Are elected officials like?
No, I think it's like who the governor appoints. Yeah, and just even like a lot of people don't know this, but technically in Pennsylvania, when there's a proposed school property tax increase, it's supposed to go to voter referendum, but there are exemptions. And when Tom Corbett first came in, there were 10 exemptions, which accounted for, guess what, 100% of the exemptions. We reduced it to 3, which brought it down to 40% of the exemptions. I wanted it to take it to 0, but they reduced it to pensions, cost of living, and building and construction to pay for it, which still account for 40% of the exemptions. I mean, we tightened it, but there's still, a lot to do. So that's what I said. Even though we have local control, they have all these ways around it. It's not like we have local control, but and a lot of the reason we have local control, but we really don't, is because of state laws. Which, I mean, I wasn't there when we made them, but it is because of state laws. So you're right. I mean, it's a very tough issue. It's a very tough issue. The other issue people talk about, and I'm not saying either or on this, is combining school districts, reducing costs. I'm not saying where I stand on that issue. I'm not going there. But there's a lot of different ways to talk about what we can do with regard to school districts.
Another thing is those mandates. The state puts the mandates on the local, but if you had everything out of the state, I think they'd think a little about what mandates they were asking locals to do, because they are worried that them would really be funding the mandates.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, it really is sick, because you have the school board. The school board goes like this to the state, and the state goes like this to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
And they point at each other like this. No, it's the school board's fault. No, it's the state's fault. And and like I said, I only came in here 6 years ago. I didn't create these mandates and all these other things. I think both sides have some points, but I do think a way out of it is HB 76.
Got a question, different school district stuff and all, but the management fees and everything for the pensions that are going on, state and the teachers union part, right now it's $63 billion underfunded. We lost $25 billion of that through fees that management charged us for managing that. That's a substantial sum out of $63 billion. There's been talk through Corbett and Wolf now to try to control that and not really put in pension things into the riskiest funds, hedge funds you can possibly put money into. And they did it again. They still dumped another $100 million into it. Are they doing anything serious about getting rid of that?
You're absolutely right. And it needs to stop. And one of the easiest ways to do it is, I had a gentleman come to my office from Berks County that showed me all this information a couple years ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he showed me all this information. And one of the things I did not know with all these fees that are charged is, we have a pretty big investment company here in Pennsylvania called Vanguard. They don't charge these fees. We could put all of our state pensions in Vanguard without paying these fees, while helping a state business, while avoiding these fees. But all I will say is, and I can't say any more than this, is look at politicians' campaign contributions, and then you will find why it is the way it is. And like I said, I'm not in leadership. I don't, if I ever am blessed to be higher up, I would be the first to do that, to get us into, lower fees or no fees. But, this gentleman did show me some of the people involved and where their campaign contributions were coming from, significant amounts of money, and then it all started to make sense. I mean, not make sense, but make sense, if you know what I mean.
I want to change the subject of
Sure.
all of this. I believe liquor privatization hit the governor's desk, and or did it not?
No,
It passed one house, or,
past the Senate.
okay, didn't pass the legislation.
It didn't come through the House. Yeah, it's such a complicated issue. The version that the Senate passed was not, the Speaker of the House is very supportive of liquor privatization. It's Mike Turzai. The Senate version, he felt was not really liquor privatization, which he was right, it wasn't. So he would not run it in the House. So there was no vote. I mean, there was no vote in the House, so it never came to a vote. Yeah, it was this convoluted bill that came from the Senate that only grocery stores could sell wine, but if the grocery store sold wine, like you had to like sit down and have a glass of it, and then they would cork it. I mean, it was the biggest joke I've ever heard. I mean, and I've heard that the head of the retail union, Wendell Young, UFCW 1776, helped write the bill, which explains everything to me. You know, basically the idea is, okay, we're going to pass something, but make it so crappy that nobody will pass it.
Why was Governor Corbett so weak, especially when it came to the pension issue? Why couldn't he freeze the pensions and initiate the vote?
You know, that's a good question. I can't speak for him. I mean, all I can say is I looked at the election results in 2014. I saw really Democratic states like Maryland, Illinois, Massachusetts elect Republican governors. Pennsylvania is not, Pennsylvania is a swing state. It's not as Democratic as Massachusetts or Maryland, and they threw Tom Corbett out. I believe where the problem is, and where the problem was, I should say was the Senate. It was the Senate. The Senate ran roughshod over Tom Corbett and blocked a lot of the things we wanted to do. If it was up to the House, if it was up to just the House and Tom Corbett, we would have gotten liquor, we would have gotten pensions, we would have gotten a lot of good things done, paycheck protection. But there's a lot of, I should say, union-friendly Republicans in the Senate that were not willing to go there. But something happened in the last 2 years to the Senate, and that is Scott Wagner got elected. And he's really shaken up that place. Had he been there when Tom Corbett was there, I think, I know it's ifs, ands, and buts, but if he was there when Corbett was there, I do think you would see a change. The Senate's they like themselves over there, and they're very powerful. And
They're a strong leader.
But you're right.
Tom Corbett
You're
was a
right.
strong leader.
You're right. You're right.
Honestly, I don't feel he wanted to be governor again.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, if I was governor,
His campaign started so late.
Yeah.
They wanted it.
I agree with you. If I was governor, I would have told the Senate. I would have told the Senate. Not only I'm not running any of your bills, but I'm not. You're not getting paid. You're not getting paid until this is what I want, and unless you're going to at least come to the table, you're not getting paid. He didn't play hardball enough. And that's what you have to do. It's what Scott Walker did in Wisconsin. I don't know if you remember when he passed that union bill. The Democrats left the state and went to Illinois. He didn't care. He still got it done. That's what you gotta have. You gotta mix.
Question, and again, more on the corporate welfare stuff. Especially like in this area, we do lots of it. And there's just been in the paper as far as the PP&L and their building that's in this area, but they can't take advantage of it. Where do you stand on corporate welfare issues like that?
I'm not a fan of it. I mean, that's why I said I would like to lower broad-based taxes rather than continue to give to corporate welfare. I mean, I've always voted where the corporate welfare is what they call, we pass a budget and we pass a fiscal code. The fiscal code is like 4,000 pages, and that's where all the goodies are in. I always vote against the fiscal code or raising the debt limit for that. I always vote against it because that's where all that corporate welfare is in. I print it out every year. It's bigger than 2 Bibles put together. You read through it and you see every pet project. I always vote against it. I mean, it's everything that's wrong with government.
Well, how many of those things are going into this year's budget? last year's budget that's still not done. Do you see more bills and things like that passing through your house, or the Senate's getting that are like these wham money kind of things, walking around money?
Yeah, well, WAMs were supposed to be gone, but they came back with a vengeance in December. When we almost had that deal, when Republicans started to cave, you started to see some of these Republicans starting to vote to advance the budget, and you look, oh, well, there's some big bridge being built in their district or something. Wolf said he would change Harrisburg, but he started passing out the cash to pay for it. So, that's a tough question because, we have passed legislative vehicles and our leadership has to ban WAMs. But I guess the governor has all these different kind of parliamentary tricks to get around it. I guess we could take them to court, but you saw how we got decimated in the Supreme Court this year in Pennsylvania. They're not gonna rule our way. Those elections are bad for us in November. They're gonna rule in favor of the governor.
How much billions of dollars is derived from corporations paying taxes
Oh,
in the budget?
I'm gonna have to have Dustin get back to you on that one. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. It's in the billions, obviously, but I don't know off the top of my head. It's a lot.
And again, it's been in the paper as far as the governor is like overspending
Right.
the budget that's
Right.
been passed technically. Where's that stand and what's going on? They were actually going to sue him, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's in court.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in court. I don't, again, I will say this, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm glad we're suing him, but I do not understand where he thinks he gets this power from. I do not understand it. He thinks he's the king. And, that's the problem though is, some local court, some appellate court, may rule against him, but by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, they're going to rule in his favor. I'm just saying they're going to rule in. The state Supreme Court, and God knows now if it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, where we have a 4-4 tie, and who knows who they appoint. That's why I said, elections are important. Elections are very important, and the judicial branch is extremely important. I don't know how everybody feels about this, but I'm a strong proponent of voter ID. We had a Republican majority on the court, and they threw voter ID out. So, it passed the legislative body, and Tom Corbett signed it into law. It's one of the best things I thought we got done under his tenure, but the court said no. So, it's amazing. Sometimes you wonder why there even is a legislature.
Anybody else have any more questions?
They're good. I like it.
I'm not sweating that much, huh?
Thanks,
I want to thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks, guys.
There's coffee, teas and stuff, and a couple of chips and pretzels if anybody wants to stick around a little. Personal handing and whatever, meet and greet. Go for it. All in the back, I'll open that up. Thank you again very much. I wanted to make one announcement. This is for next month. Justin has said that he would do a debate with Bill Coyle. His opponent is coming too. We're still finalizing a little thing, but I think it's pretty good. So next month we'll have that here on Thursday again, doing the same thing, and you can meet the other guy too. With that, I'll pass it. If you signed up there and left your email, then I'll send that information along, and you'll get it when it's all finalized. Thank you again. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you. You too. Yeah.